Hello again and welcome back. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about digital briefs that you receive from clients and stakeholders and alike. And I'm sure it won't surprise you when I say that in my experience at least, most digital briefs that I receive suck. However, you might find it slightly more controversial when I tell you that I advise most of the agencies and in-house teams that I mentor to largely ignore the briefs that they receive from prospective clients and stakeholders. Okay, so maybe ignore is too strong a word, but I do encourage them to take any brief that they receive with a huge pinch of salt and not to be constrained by it. And I would advise you to do the same. Let me explain why. In many cases, the person writing the brief doesn't have a massive amount of digital experience, or at the very least, doesn't have a lot of experience in your particular field, if that makes sense. At best, this means that any brief that they write turns into a wish list of functionality they think that they might need either now or at random points in the future. At worst, it means that they write a brief for something that they just don't need at all. More than once I've received a brief for, say, a website redesign project when throwing out the website and starting again from scratch would be the worst thing they could possibly do. I've also received briefs where the client is intent on changing their website when the problem actually lies in the fact that they're driving the wrong kind of users to the site through things like poorly targeted advertising. My point here is that in many cases, the client is poorly positioned to diagnose their problem and the best solution. However, even if they do have the experience and the expertise to do so, it's still worth looking beyond their brief, as if you don't, you're failing to provide that client with all that you have to offer them. You can and should bring a lot more to a project than blindly implementing other people's ideas. Now, I'm aware that you might feel that you're not in a position and you don't have the authority to start suggesting alternative approaches. It's hard to turn around to a prospective client and challenge their approach, and it's even harder to challenge, say, your boss. However, if approached with sensitivity, it's almost always appreciated. Not being constrained by the brief doesn't mean outright rejecting it or telling the client that it's a terrible idea. Instead, it's about having a conversation with the client about their objectives. It's about stepping back, as we talked about previously, from the brief and understand the underlying motivations that sit below the project. Ask questions about their approach and offer alternatives that may address the same underlying objective in a different way. However, most of all, accept it if the client continues down the original path. Don't get offended if they don't take your advice. My clients occasionally ignore my advice, and that's absolutely fine. I'm there as an advisor, but ultimately it's their project and their decision. If you have that humility to accept their decision, you're rarely going to find yourself in trouble when you suggest alternative approaches. In fact, in my experience, being willing to offer advice and have an opinion about things is a great way of standing out from the crowd in a very crowded marketplace, or if you work in-house, building a solid reputation within the organization. But perhaps I'm being naive. Perhaps I'm in a privileged position that gives me a degree of latitude when working with clients. If so, I would love to know. I would love to hear what challenges you face in this area. Do you feel like you can have those open and honest conversations around the brief that you receive, or do you feel that those briefs are a straitjacket that you have to conform to? I honestly would love to hear from you over this one, and I'm not just asking you to leave a comment and to improve some algorithm on YouTube videos. You can drop me an email to paul@boagworld.com and let's talk about it. Let's talk about some of these challenges.